I've been on a bit of a Harry Potter kick lately. I reread the entire series a bunch of times and rewatched most of the movies. One thing that stood out to me was the occasions in the books where they would mention the population of Hogwarts. So today I decided to dive into some statistics and answer the question, how big is the population of Hogwarts? I made an Excel chart that graphed the incoming class and total population in a given year. It is widely accepted that Harry Potter's class, entering in the September of 1991, has 40 students, so we'll start there. If there were only 40 students in every year across 7 years, there would only be about 280 total at a given time. I don't believe this to be the case. For one, it's absurd that there are only 280 kids between the ages of 11 and 17 across all of magical Britain. But also, grades across every public school ever are prone to fluctuation. The year Harry's grade was born was 1979 to 1980, which was the year before Voldemort fell, and so I believe this is why the class size is so small. We get told that many children of Voldemort's opponents were slaughtered. Mad-Eye Moody states as such in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when telling Harry about the original Order of the Phoenix. That's Marley McKinnon. She was killed 2 weeks after this was taken. They got her whole family. That's Edgar Bones. They got him and his family too. There is a common conception that the houses for this year stand at an even 10 each, but I don't believe this either. It's not like the sorting hat has to balance them all out. I would assume that it would fluctuate a little bit. In a more literary sense, I highly doubt there are just 2 unnamed Gryffindor girls, and I think there are just 8 in Gryffindor that year. Those other 2 slots I believe go to Slytherin. In total, Gryffindor has the smallest with 8, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff would be tied at 10 each, and Slytherin has the most at 12. Slytherin plus Gryffindor equals 20. Which fits with this line in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Keep in mind that Slytherin has the most, because I will be talking more about that later. While the 1991 class is small, I believe the following year would be even smaller. On the graph, the class of 1992, a class that includes Ginny Weasley, Luna Lovegood, and Colin Creevey, is approximated to be around 35 students. This is because they were born during the last and worst year of Voldemort's reign of terror. Birth rates would be low and child mortality would be high. Meanwhile, in Order of the Phoenix, we get a flashback to Snape's 5th year at school during his OWLs. It is stated that more than 100 rolls of parchment zoomed into the air and into Professor Flitwick's outstretched hands. 1 roll per student and only 1 class in the room leaves us with between 100 and 120 students. I believe the population would be roughly 110 students per year regularly, with Snape's year being a little higher as population naturally grows. However, this would stagnate between 1972 and 77 during the start of Voldemort's First War, which we know started in 1970, due to this line by Dumbledore in The Sorcerer's Stone. "You can't blame them," said Dumbledore gently. "We've had precious little to celebrate for 11 years. 1981 minus 11 equals 1970. After 1977, the population crashes as Voldemort gains strength and targets families, with a low of only about 80 students in 1981, the year he falls. While the incoming class remains stagnant between 1981 and 1987, the year Percy Weasley and Oliver Wood enter Hogwarts, the overall would start to bleed out as those larger classes leave school. Between 1988 and 1992, the class size crashes again from 60 to just 35 as the birth rate decline from 1977 to 1981 reaches its peak. In conclusion, between the time James Potter enters Hogwarts to the time Harry Potter enters Hogwarts, the class sizes have dropped roughly by 2/3, from about 120 to 40. During Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry plays Slytherin in the 93-94 Quidditch final. It is noted that behind the Slytherin goalposts, however, 200 people were wearing green. During this match, almost all the other three houses were supporting Gryffindor. This means on the surface there are roughly 200 Slytherins at the school this year. Also, this is the smallest overall class size, as the 7th years are the beginning of that earlier mentioned 1988-92 decline. There are a total of roughly 365 students this year. We can assume that Gryffindor has the smallest house size at roughly 75, followed by Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff at roughly 85 each. That means we can give Slytherin 120. If we assume that some Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws, as well as parents and Hogsmeade residents, rooted for Slytherin, this is the final after all, we can easily hit around 200. However, just barely. This just goes to show Slytherin does have a huge population advantage over the other three houses, and this makes sense. We can assume that in 1971 the houses were roughly even, but as Voldemort grew in power, Slytherin's numbers stayed the same or even grew as the other houses shrank. However, after Voldemort's fall, his followers, many of whom were Slytherins and would have had children who were in Slytherin, fled or were imprisoned. As such, their generations shrank, and by the time the class of 94 was entering, Slytherin's lead would have been severely diminished. Speaking of the class of 1994, they would be the largest class. This is because they were born in 1983, 2 years after the fall of Voldemort. We know that in many societies that win wars, we often see a baby boom following said war. We can point to the US and Britain after World War II as an example, or Red China immediately after the Chinese Civil War. The previous year would still be in recovery of only about 60. So we can put the class of 1994 above the pre-war average of 110 at roughly 140, but it would fall back to 120 for the class of 95. We can also assume that it would remain at this for the class of 96. But 1997 would be the most unique year yet. You see, shortly before this school year started, the Ministry of Magic fell to Lord Voldemort. A side effect of this was new Muggle-born students for the class of 1997 were barred from attending. Furthermore, almost all existing Muggle-borns at Hogwarts were driven into hiding. We can assume that Muggle-borns made up roughly 20% of the population. If this was a normal year, the school would have had about 635 students, but because of this anti-Muggle-born actions, the overall of this year was probably less than 510. This isn't even mentioning students like the Weasleys, Harry Potter, or Luna Lovegood who left for other Voldemort-related reasons. The following year, 1998, was another unique one that I didn't put on the chart. The classes of 91, 92, and 93 lost roughly 30 members during the Battle of Hogwarts, but several members of the class of 91 would join for the class of 92 to retake the year. This would offset the losses the class of 92 would have sustained during the battle, making it roughly 35 again. However, the roughly 30 Muggle-borns that were denied access in 1997 would join the class of 98, meaning the overall for this year would be a whopping 735, making it the biggest year since 1977. After 1998, it would take until 2009 to fully recover to 120 students per year. This is because some students who would have been in these classes would have been killed off in the 96 to 98 war. The 2007 and 2008 classes would be the smallest of these post-war generations due to them being born at the height of that conflict. If we resume the growth from before Voldemort's First War, we can say that the school grows at the rate of 5 students every 2 years. This means by the time Albus Potter enters school in 2017, there are roughly 920 students. His grade alone would be 140 students, 100 more than his father's class. So, in conclusion, like all societies, the amount born in a year fluctuates given the current events during the births. In Hogwarts' case, wars killed off some of their students before they could even set foot in the castle. Harry's class was one of the smallest generations to pass through Hogwarts, and that's all thanks to Lord Voldemort. This was a fun video to plan and make, and I have many more where that came from, so stay tuned for more Harry Potter related content in the future.